Wieder eine neue Folge von Nyimas Bantaba. Mein Name ist Nyima Jadama. Bantaba ist ein traditioneller Treffpunkt, wo Leute zusammensetzen und sich unterhalten. Der Name Bantaba leitet sich von dem Wort für einen großen Baum ab. Der Begriff stammt aus Mandinka, meiner Muttersprache, werde aber meist in Gambia und Senegal ausgesprochen. In dieser Diskussion werde ich mit verschiedenen Themen auseinandersetzen und Diskussionen führen mit Leuten mit diversen kulturellen Hintergründen, aber mit Fokus auf Migration, Frauen-Empowerment und Kultur. Heute im Studio habe ich 4 Feministinnen aus Brasilien, Kenia, Deutschland und sowie aus dem Iran, die mit uns live sprechen. Wir werden über Feminismus weltweit, Aktivismus aus verschiedenen Perspektiven reden. Danke, Ladies, dass ihr alle dabei seid. Unsere heutige Sendung werde eigentlich auf Englisch, komplett auf Englisch ausgestrahlt, weil Nyimas Bantaba ist eigentlich eine multilinguale Sendung. What is feminism all about? Why are feminists categorized in different perspectives, or how is feminism perceived in various countries? More on this topic will be discussed on Nyimas Bantaba. We will be talking about feminism worldwide, activism from different perspectives, with 4 feminists from 4 perspectives from 4 different countries. Stay tuned, this is the Nyimas Bantaba. And now I may actually introduce my guest. Like I said, I have 2 here with me and I have 2 via Zoom with us. Bárbara Santos first. Bárbara is Brazilian originally. She is a versatile feminist, the artistic director of KURINGA, Space for Theater of the Oppressed in Berlin, and founder of the Magdalena International Feminist Theatre of the Oppressed network, composed by practitioners and collectives from Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Thank you for joining us, Bárbara. Jennifer Kamo is a Kenyan Berlin-based activist and research. In 2012, Jennifer co-founded the International Women Space, IVS, an anti-racist feminist group for women of all backgrounds, but especially for refugees and migrant women. She also founded the Break the Isolation group for refugee women. Via Zoom, Mina Khani. Mina actually is live with us all the way from Portugal. Mina is actually from Iran. She is a left-wing feminist. She has lived in Germany for almost 2 decades and currently works for an LGBT organization called Sich, the networks of Iranian lesbians and transgenders. She is also a freelance writer and publicist for several newspapers and magazines in German and Farsi. And last but not the least, Miriam Gutekunst, joining us live from Bayern München, is a German, a cultural anthropologist, and works as a researcher and author. She has been involved in feminism for several years and is part of the Fem Lab, Laboratory for Feminist Research, Education and Practice. She is concerned with transnational feminism as well as the ambivalent entanglement of feminism and racism. Most recently, Miriam curated the digital exhibition project Feminist Change, Spaces, Struggles, and a Debate in München, Bayern. Thank you. And welcome, Miriam, Mina, Jennifer, and Bárbara. In case you're just joining us, you can actually follow our discussion on Nyimas Bantaba TV at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or send us an email on nyimasbantaba@gmail.com. And my first question goes to Bárbara. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much for joining us. Bárbara, my first question, of course, feminism is wide. It has a different connotation. How is it defined? What is actually feminism all about? Who is a feminist?
Yeah, so in our network, we focus our action in how we are going to build up or deconstruct and reconstruct the society, yeah? And then our focus is really to be anti-patriarchy. Mm-hmm. So we, as a network, we work also of course, with a non-white perspective. Yes, like I come from Latin America, and we have a strong base in the black feminism, but also indigenous feminism, like what we call communitary feminism, the community as an aim. Yeah, community as a way of being in this world. Yes, being feminist is a way of try to make the society better for all of us. It's not a question of women's space, but it's a space for the society, for the community. This is the perspective that we work with.
Feminism, a space for the society where everybody could belong, equal rights and so on. Thanks for that. But that actually takes me to another question to you, Bárbara. Feminism and before, the way it was perceived and the now modern generation perhaps could actually differ. What does feminism mean today?
So I think when we say before and actual, we are talking about only one perspective, only one recognition. Yeah, what was before? Of course, people in each period they are facing limitations of the period, yeah, of their own social context. The difference now is the inclusion of other perspectives. Yeah, what was before is the recognition of only one perspective, that was white perspective. Yeah. Because before we had feminists in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia. We have women that was fighting the struggle for several things, but they were kind of invisible for this world. And now what we see is the inclusion, in the sense that we are occupying space, and we say, we have other perspectives, and the other perspective is really strong as well. You know, before and now is about who is speaking, who has space, yeah, and we are saying we want to be heard. We're not only about to speak and show up our perspective, but also fighting for the space of narratives. Yeah, we want to have other narratives, and we are say that we fight for that.
Speaking of, Jenny, that goes to you, my next question. Speaking of, we are fighting for narratives, speaking of perspective, you also mention black feminism and so on. And that goes, because I'll be like, okay, there exists the African way of feminism, there exists the white way of feminism and all that. Jennifer, to your own perspective, what is African feminism? Personally, I know it includes many strains of its own. How would you define African feminism?
African feminism is what we would describe in a broader perspective as womanism.
As womanism, yeah.
It's womanism. And this womanism is the possibility and the spaces created for women to address topics that are mostly related to women. Then when we come to a white context, now here in a country where it's white, I would term myself as a black feminist, just to distinguish from the other forms of feminism. And what Bárbara is saying is what I also identify as, because there is a white feminism and there's a black feminism that is fighting against white supremacy, against racism, against every other forms of exploitation, and that's how I would identify. Otherwise, in my Kenyan country, I would talk about womanism, because the concept around the womanism is something we have all been socialized around. But if you call, my mother is the biggest womanist I have seen, or a feminist. But if I use these words, she will say she's not. So it's the content that what makes the womanism, the things that add up to fight, to include the fight of the woman. For me, that's what I want to stick to, the core and the context that I am fighting with.
This is quite interesting. Bárbara talk about the other perspective, and you talk about both the African and the womanism, the Kenyan-wise. And I would say the Gambian-wise, I am a local feminist. These actually include the many traditions, strange attached to it. And you see people who are great feminists, you tell them they're feminists. Like you said, your mom would say, no, I'm not a feminist. But then not knowing that she's the biggest feminist. I got to know that I am a real feminist when I came to Germany, actually. So, I mean, because it's... Anyway, so Miriam, we talk about perspectives of feminism. And of course, it has approaches, different approaches. Could you tell us maybe 3 approaches of feminism, or to your own perspective? What do you think are those approaches could be?
Hi, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I think it's important to take this question personally, because I think every feminist would answer it differently. For me personally, I think my access to feminism was perhaps like for many women born in Germany from my generation, was more a queer feminism, like to question your own gender and sexuality and desire. And I think this is still, important for me. But I think during that time, the most important is like an anti-racist and decolonial feminism. And before I came to feminism, I was more involved in supporting also migrant struggles and in anti-racist projects. And I think key is to link both projects, of course. And especially as someone being born in Germany, I think our responsibility is really to tackle also and to fight the rise of right-wing populism in Germany, because there we have the tendency that right-wing populists instrumentalize feminism. And this is something I think we should really discuss, because it's also a worldwide phenomenon. And and after all, I think what is also important for all of us is care feminism, like to put care really in the center of our society and economy, and to take care for each other, not only for our family, but for friends, and actually for all people of our society, especially the most vulnerable. Yeah, I think these are the 3 main feminist approaches that influenced me myself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mina. Okay, Miriam, thanks for that. Feminism is actually a worldwide approaches and to the approaches that you said. And Mina, I am actually interested to know, of course, feminism has an impact in one way or the other. And I did like to know from your side, what kind of impact does feminism or feminism has in the society?
First of all, thank you for the invitation also. And maybe one question, can I answer in German, or
Yeah,
it is not possible?
You can.
Okay. Ich bin fließender auf Deutsch. Also was für, jetzt nochmal die Frage, was war die?
So, welche Rolle spielt Feminismus in unserer Gesellschaft?
Was heißt die Gesellschaft? Also das heißt, ich wollte, dass du die Frage nochmal wiederholst, weil wir haben nicht nur eine Gesellschaft. Und das ist mega wichtig. Weil wenn man mich fragt, so, welche Rolle Feminismus in einer Gesellschaft spielt, dann ich bin ja in unterschiedlichen Gesellschaften selbst sozialisiert worden. Ich komme aus dem Iran, wie du das selber erzählt hast. Und ich bin auch teilweise in Deutschland sozialisiert worden. Und wenn ich ehrlich bin, ist Feminismus für die Iraner im Moment, ist es was vielleicht anders, oder wir sind auf einer anderen Ebene, wenn wir über Feminismus sprechen, als in Deutschland. Und das ist ja auch so ein bisschen verbunden mit dieser Perspektivenfrage, die du vorhin schon gestellt hattest. Aus welcher Perspektive? So, zum Beispiel, ich denke, für viele Feministen aus den Westasien zum Beispiel, ist es halt sehr wichtig, dass sie überhaupt die Komplexität ihrer Gesellschaft auch so zu verstehen und auch zu verstehen zu geben für die.
Mina, sorry, kannst du im Mikro sprechen? Wir holen dich selbst gleich. Kannst du bitte ein bisschen näher dran, genau, im Mikro sprechen? Danke.
Ja. Das ist halt die Komplexität zu verstehen und die Komplexität auch so darzustellen, wie es ist. ich erkläre es ein bisschen deutlicher, damit es, also mit Beispielen, damit es verständlich wird. Zum Beispiel das mit Hijab-Frage oder das mit Kopftuch-Frage. Es ist natürlich, es wird anders diskutiert, zum Beispiel in Deutschland oder in Europa innerhalb der feministischen Community als zum Beispiel innerhalb der iranischen Feministinnen, weil wir auch im Moment zwei Kämpfe führen, und zwar einmal gegen den iranischen Staat und Zwangsverschleierung und einmal, wenn wir außerhalb des Irans sind, gegen diese ganzen Stereotypes über iranische Frauen und Kopftücher und so weiter und so fort. Also die Komplexität der Sache bei den iranischen Frauen gerade oder afghanischen Frauen oder andere Frauen in dieser Region, ist es so, dass sie auch teilweise sich die ganze Zeit anders definieren müssen in unterschiedlichen Kontexten und anders sogar sprechen müssen, weil sie mit anderen Strukturen, also unterschiedlichen Strukturen, unterschiedlichen patriarchalen Strukturen zu tun haben. Deshalb, ich glaube für mich, es ist schwer, über eine Gesellschaft zu sprechen. Wir haben unterschiedliche Gesellschaften.
Okay, Mina, apropos Gesellschaft, das wäre auch eine Frage von mir. Du hast schon 2, 3 Fragen in einer Frage geantwortet. Sehr, danke, ich bin wirklich dankbar. Aber das wäre auch eine Frage von mir über dieses unterschiedliche Gesellschaft oder die Unterschied zwischen Feminismus in Iran auch in Deutschland. Aber das war eine gute Zusammenfassung, ja? Danke dir. To Bárbara, again, patriarchy, when you talk about feminism, of course, patriarchy comes on top. It is a socially constructed system where males have primarily power. And this actually affects many aspects of life, from political leadership, you name it. How are you and your feminist movement? Because obviously you have a feminist movement, speaking of the KURINGA, the Madalena International, and then you name it. How are you and your feminist movement, particularly to patriarchy, tackling this issue?
Yeah. When we talk about the patriarchal system, we have to also to make a context of that. Yeah, it's not the same. When you say, okay, the man has a position, but which man we are talking about? Yeah. When you say that, okay, maybe the white men have more privilege, and men in general have more privilege than women in our binary society, that is everything is separate. But when we have to maybe some other perspective, for instance, to imagine a poor community, and we have a lot of black men, and we say, which kind of patriarchal position they have, or the indigenous male. I'm not saying that this man is not sexist or machist. It's not about that. It's about the patriarchal system itself. You know, it's not the same even for men. Don't have this generalization. What we want to face is the system itself. Yeah, to deconstruct it, because we have to overcome the system. If you not overcome the system, we are not change it. You know, this thing of a hierarchical way of organize the society. You know, even when we say men, it's not the same category for all of us. Yeah, if you say, for example, a man that is trans, it's completely different position in the society. Yeah? So we have to pay attention also in these specificities. Yeah, how to deconstruct it, but be clear what we are talking about.
I mean, thank you so very much for that correction, because I am somebody, I always say some men or some women or some people, and it should be some. Not all are categorized this way. Jennifer, you mentioned in my first question while answering that if you were to categorize feminism in Germany and Kenya, of course it differs. So tell me, what type of feminism does exist in Germany that does not exist in Kenya, in contrast?
Racism, for example.
Okay.
This is one topic. Yes. This is one topic that has forced us to organize separately, because we are the ones affected by racism.
Okay.
In Kenya, we don't have this concept of racism. We have other things like tribalism, but we are all we are black in a black country. So this topic of race does not exist. And I think that's the main point.
Okay.
The rest is patriarchal. It has very different context, the way Barbara has defined it. But then when we come here, there's white supremacy. And how white supremacy is interfering with our Africanness, and how white supremacy produces capitalism, and who benefits from capitalism, and who is being exploited by capitalism. This is one of the two main differences I would point out.
Thank you so very much for pointing out those vital differences. Miriam, now I want to hear the German perspective in contrast. So what are the core values of feminism in the German perspective? Miriam?
Yeah, I think, again, this is a difficult question because, of course, all of you are also active in a German context, and it's very different. But I would also say that the idea is to create a society where everyone, regardless of which gender, origin, class, ability, etc., has equal rights and chances. And I mean, in Germany, we should think about how our local struggles are related to the global context. And I think there I agree with Jennifer. We are, again, at the question of how we can fight racism as well within feminist movements, but also racism that instrumentalizes feminist ideas. And there we should think about also how we can overcome boundaries between different movements, and also build alliances, especially also with migrant women, people of color, without this discourse of saving or all these stereotypes Mina already mentioned. I think this is the big challenge, how we can build alliances. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, that was quite interesting. Mina, sorry, I had to break you from answering the first question. Now, back to the question. Of course, African feminism and the type of feminism in Iran might differ but a bit, because obviously we also know that there exists this strong cultural beliefs, religious, and so on. And Mina, you're a link feminist, part of an LGBTQ. Like, I was like, okay, how is this perspective? Would you be part of still such a group in Iran, thinking of the the religious and traditional atmosphere? How would you differentiate this?
Im Zusammenhang zu dem ich auch was vorhin gesagt habe, dass Gesellschaften unterschiedlich aufgebaut sind, Gesellschaften unterschiedlich gestaltet sind und so weiter und so fort, heißt es auch aus meiner Perspektive, nicht nur Feminist sein, ist es kontextual zu sehen, sondern auch links sein. Es ist eine kontextuelle Sache. Also die linke Iraner haben vielleicht andere Fragen und andere Perspektiven, wenn es zu soziale Fragen kommt, als zum Beispiel die Linken in Deutschland. Und ich darf das sagen, weil ich ja auch mit beiden zusammenarbeite, beiden Communities zusammenarbeite und in beiden Communities sozialisiert und politisiert worden bin. So, links sein in dem Moment, auch als Feministin, heißt es für mich auch in einem iranischen Kontext mit diesem Staat, mit dem wir zu tun haben, auch alle anderen Fragen mit zu involvieren. wie zum Beispiel queere Frage. Das ist im Moment, wir haben mit einem System zu tun, das nicht nur Frauenrechte entnommen hat, sondern auch zum Beispiel eine von den wenigen Ländern, in dem es für Lesbian und Gays noch irgendwie Todesstrafe gibt. Und obwohl der Iran versucht, so darzustellen, als wäre Iran das Paradies für Transgenders. Wir hatten ja, das war ja vor 2-3 Wochen, als Ella, eine iranische Transfrau in Berlin, sich selbst, was wir als suizidale Feminizide beschreiben würden, sich selbst entzündet hat und sich selbst umgebracht hat. So, es gibt einen Dokumentarfilm auf Deutsch über sie, wo sie selber erzählt, wie Frauen im Iran behandelt werden. So gesehen heißt es für mich, linke Feministin sein, für eine Gesellschaft zu kämpfen, in der es Homosexualität oder Transgender zu sein nicht mehr als eine Sünde gilt. So, und dann, wenn ich halt im deutschen Kontext bin, muss ich dafür kämpfen, dass die deutsche Linke zum Beispiel eine andere Vorstellung hat über die iranische Community oder iranische LGBT-Community und so weiter und so fort. Also da ist es auch so ein bisschen dieser Kampf da, immer gegen den Strom zu kämpfen, immer gegen die vorhandene patriarchale Strukturen, die da vorhanden sind und wie sie funktionieren, zu kämpfen. Dankeschön.
Vielen Dank. That was well detailed, at least talk about the different focuses in regards to the link feminism, queer, transgender, and so on. And it's always quite interesting, to hear or to learn about other perspectives as well, in contrast to the country that we are in, that is Germany. Bárbara, so in my introduction about you, I said you founded many organizations, or you have feminist movement, and this include the KURINGA and also Magdalena International, an international feminist network that actually more focuses on women and feminism. Tell us about this organization. What actually do you guys do there, especially Magdalena Berlin?
So we are practitioner of a theater of the oppressed, yeah? And then I am practitioner of this method that's born in Latin America, in Brazil especially. And this theater is about to put on stage questions of the oppressed people, yeah? But being part of this movement, we found out that the majority of the topics that was about women was directed by male. This was not different. Everywhere is like that. Yeah, you have the majority of the directors is white, is heteronormative, is male. And then we start a movement to ask ourselves, how could we express the oppression that we as women face in the society? Women in a large sense, yeah, women that include all of us that feel as a woman, also recognize as a woman, also fighting to be, yeah? So, and the situation is like the questions that we are asking the society was directed by the male. And then we start to make a movement like, let's ask to training more women, but they be facilitator of this process. Yeah? They come together and they together find a way of represent it on stage. So when we start to do this, we make a big difference, a really big difference, to put on stage our own perspective, our own narrative, like we made in the beginning of this discussion. The narrative is really important. Inside of our movement, it's really important to put the narrative of black women, because if you live like that, we be the space of a white woman, because white woman has more time, more possibility to travel, to study, to have a free time to do theater, yeah? So what we try also is create space for the indigenous women from Latin America to have their own voice, or narratives, or lesbians, or other other kind of groups or women with disability, you know, people that have special questions for the society. All of us want to overcome patriarchy system, but we have our own place that we are speaking about it, yeah? Our own disadvantage, our own struggles that we have to achieve. So this is one international movement that is composed by feminist theater groups that we put on stage our questions, our narratives. This is about.
Super interesting how feminism or feminists express feminism through theater on stage. That's quite interesting, you know. Let's talk about your work, Jennifer. You are actually currently involved in feminism through, how do we call it? Involved in feminism against the asylum policies. What effects this asylum policies has. I know you of being this activist on women empowerment for women migrants or refugees. Tell us a bit about your work and what exactly what kind of policies are you fighting for feminists?
Thanks for the question. International Women's Space started with the Oranienplatz movement, which was a refugee movement. And this refugee movement was fighting for the rights of the asylum seekers and asking to abolish some of the very racist policies that were there, which involved the Residenzpflicht, the law that dictated once you're registered in one district, you're not allowed to move to the next, a voucher system. We were demanding to learn the German language. We were demanding to have permission to work. And like what people thought that you know, this narrative that people are here to feed on a social welfare, and yet they were not even allowed to work. So this is where International Women's Space was born. And it was born in a movement when we also faced sexism within a movement. And to have the space, the possibility to start talking about things that affect women just because they are women. And these things start with gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, forced marriages, and so on and so on. That for us, it's important to understand why women organize. And in terms of the asylum process, is to empower the woman and to make her understand that there is, for example, the Istanbul Convention that can be used to protect her in the process of applying for asylum, to empower her, even when she's within suffering violence as they apply for asylum, that she can apply asylum differently. But on a broader perspective, we are fighting racial profiling. We are fighting state violence, institutional racism in terms of school, state violence that comes in the forms of deportations. And then we are saying if Germany does not want refugees, they should address the reason why people are fleeing.
Okay, that's also very well detailed. Speaking of empowerment and empowering women through fighting against asylum policies, Miriam, you were or are still very actually active in different feminist movements, including the transfem or the transnational movement. What do you learn along these various perspectives?
Yeah, I think a very good experience was the group, the feminist group I had with you, Nyima, because we organized 2017 a big transnational conference on the relation between migration, development, and ecological crisis. And as a side effect, some women organized together. And it was really interesting because we had like really different backgrounds, not only like we were from Germany, from Gambia, from Cameroon, from Argentina, but also we were of very different ages, with kids, without kids, different sexualities. So it was really quite heterogeneous, our group. And this was a really good experience for me because we had really, we had conflicts and we had very fruitful discussions, but I think this is so important that we meet beyond the boundaries of movements or groups or the different approaches, because I think then something new can be created. And this was something that was really important for me, for my experience with feminist activism.
Recreation is always important, yeah, and I think that transform network should be recreated. Mina, you also are very active in different feminist groups or movements, and you particularly wrote articles on feminism and issues happening in Iran with so many different newspapers across Germany in German and Farsi. Tell us what really actually is your focus, and what do you learn along? Anything new or anything different?
Ja, ich habe viel gelernt innerhalb der feministischen Bewegungen, und zwar weltweit. Also ich habe gelernt von Frauenstreik, das Organisieren einer neuen feministischen Welle in Deutschland schon mehr Zusammenarbeit braucht mit Frauen, mit denen man vielleicht nicht so unbedingt dieselbe Ideen von Feminismus hat und so weiter und so fort. Und man muss diese ganzen Konflikte zum Beispiel irgendwie auch rangehen. Also man muss die auch sich auch stellen und Fragen stellen und gucken, wie es eine Welt möglich ist oder eine Bewegung möglich ist, in dem migrantische Frauen oder deutsche Frauen mit migrantischen Hintergrund zusammenarbeiten können mit weiße deutsche Frauen, die auch teilweise richtige Fragen stellen, zum Beispiel wie diese Ungleichheit bei Lohnen und andere Fragen, die halt deutsche Frauen haben. Ich habe gelernt, dass wir unterschiedliche Fragen haben. Ich habe gelernt, dass wenn wir sagen, dass wir in einer imperialistischen und kolonialistischen Welt leben, das ist nicht nur eine Behauptung oder eine Phrase. Es ist anders, wenn du zum Beispiel innerhalb der iranischen feministischen Bewegung oder mit irakischen, afghanischen und Black Feminism was zu tun hast, als mit deutschen weißen Feministen. Es ist anders. Und das heißt es in dem, es ist nicht eine Sache,
that's actually so very
unbedingt bewerten muss, weil ich habe ja auch
okay, Mina is actually joining us right now from Portugal. We're seeing that the sun is shining there, but the network isn't that shining as we expected. Mina, we'll pause and then we'll come back to you. Ich glaube, deine Verbindung gerade ist eigentlich sehr schlecht. Wir werden nochmal zu dir kommen. Dann stelle ich einfach weiter eine Frage an Bárbara oder Jenny. Dann vielleicht kommt eine Verbindung in einer Minute oder so. Das ist eigentlich eine sehr, sehr Diskurs, was du gerade gesagt hast. Und das wäre eine andere Frage von mir über, also wie empowert ihr Migrantinnen in Feminismus, in eurem Feminismus-Movement zu sein. Aber das könnte auch eine Frage sein. Jennifer, Mira is talking about something very important and interesting here, like involving migrants as well in the feminist movement, empowering them. And you also talk about fighting against this asylum policies for migrants through feminism and so on. How are migrants, or how easy it is to get migrants to know that, okay, you are a feminist and you have much more right, perhaps, in Gambia, for example, you can express your feminism here more than in your own country, perhaps, depending on where you're from. Are migrants coming to you, or are you getting to them? How is it? How is the migrant participation in the feminism movement?
I think the most important thing is not to use these terminologies. Otherwise, we get lost in these definitions. It's a very wide thing of defining. Labeling and branding is a wide thing.
Yeah.
The most important thing is concentrate on the concept, that someone understands why you are organizing in the first place. And when we organize for the things that have oppressing us in a very common way, before, we used to go to people, but now people are coming to us. Because these commonalities is what we want to join to fight. And when we talk about the commonalities in the asylum system, it brings all people applying for asylum regardless of where they are coming from. Whether it is in Asia, Africa, or the east of Europe, it brings people together because they are being oppressed by certain laws that are, like their standard. And then there's one thing to empower a woman, regardless of where they are coming from and what they do, and understanding that there are things that are oppressing us because we are women. But you cannot tell a woman who is coming to the Mediterranean about feminism, and she has been trafficked all the way. You need to empower her to be able to deal with her situation. That's the most important thing. Otherwise, we get busy defining and we lose the meaning of the whole thing.
And I hope we won't lose the meaning of the whole thing. Speaking of fighting for the oppressed, trying to create inclusion, and this goes to Bárbara, in your movement within the theater, expressing feminism on stage for the oppressed. And, do you think that theater can really change something on the issue of gender roles, like gender oppression, sexual abuse, etc. on women?
So let's be clear. Theater itself cannot change anything. Yeah, theater is theater.
Yeah.
It's like we are doing something on stage and we are doing discussion on it. What is our collaboration is about to offer the opportunity to hear and to get to know other narratives, and also to open our eyes, because when you are in the theater, you have a chance to get to know other stories. You have a chance to think about these stories and these situations. So theater is helping us in the process of getting conscious, and getting in the process to understand what's going on. When we put our question on stage, we are not only looking for the answer for this question, we are also looking to understand the question itself, and why we have this question, and where come from the problem, It's not about only the solution, because if you don't understand the problem, if you don't understand the mechanism of the oppression, you cannot find the solution. Because the solution is about we understand the oppressor itself also, is we have to understand the relations, the context is much more complex. So theater is a way that we use to approach it, to try to understand the complexity of our reality. But we don't have illusion. We are going to do in the theater the reflection, but our action has to be in the real society. The action has to be after the theater. Theater is a process of getting together, coming together, but the action has to be in the real life.
The action has to be in the real life, and to be quite honest, I learned something new from you today. That is the 5 W's and H. I only know this in the journalism context, but I don't know that feminists also have this 5 W and the H. That's actually quite interesting to know. Miriam, you recently curated a digital exhibition project called Feminist Change, Spaces, Struggles and Debates in Munich. What is this exhibition all about?
Yeah, actually, I'm still thinking about what Jennifer said, that defining and analyzing or labeling is a wide thing. And as I'm working at university, I'm analyzing and defining a lot. But actually, this exhibition project was also a student project. I did it together with the Frauen Akademie. in Munich. And the idea was to do like a documentation of local feminist struggles and to really understand what is happening right now in Munich and which groups are involved. And the idea was also like Bárbara said, like to create different narratives or see it like an archive. And actually, it's not accomplished. It's still, I think, this is one task of feminists to document and to build up an archive of a different history. And but at the end, it also was possible to bring together all the groups whose struggles we documented. And actually, there was a final discussion at the end, and these groups are working together now sometimes. So it was again also the idea of alliances, both like the analysis and documentation, but also to bring together these feminist struggles.
Bringing together the feminist struggles, and I'll take back from both you and Jennifer. Bárbara said, finding alternatives for our own very achieve. And archives. Mina, my next question, you are also, or you partly work with an LGBTQ organization called the Kulturen. This is the network of Iranian lesbians and transgenders. What narratives are you actually finding for your achieves for this organization or group of people, let me say? Not categorizing though.
Ja. Hört ihr mich? Habt ihr mich?
Was hast du gesagt?
Ob ihr mich hört?
Ja, jetzt. Bitte sprich in dein Mikro ein, ja?
Ja.
Okay.
Ja. Okay, six rank heißt 6 Farben auf Farsi. Man meint damit natürlich diese Farben von Rainbow, genau. Und das ist, es wurde dieses Netzwerk wurde vor 10 Jahren gegründet, als noch kaum überhaupt das Existenz von Lesbians und Transgenders gesprochen wurde. Wenn überhaupt über das Thema LGBT gesprochen wurde, wurde dann nur über die männliche Version, und zwar über Gay Community. Und man kannte auch nur die Gay Community. Und das war halt eine Antwort darauf, glaube ich, wenn ich die Geschichte von Six Trans so lese und betrachte. Ich hab die Arbeit von Six Trans damals als eine unabhängige linke Feministin halt selber beobachtet. Ich kannte auch einige von Mitgründern dieses Netzwerkes. Und was mich halt sehr interessiert hat und was dazu geführt hat, dass ich auch selbst zu Six Trans gefunden habe und zusammen mit ihnen gearbeitet habe, war dass sie halt im Six Trans die Narrative, es wurde ja auch schon hier gerade über Narrative gesprochen, dass man die Narrative selbst erzählt, also nicht sich von hegemoniale narrativen Erzählungen einschüchtern lässt, sondern selber die Narrative übernimmt und selber die eigene Narrative erzählt. Und das war genauso das, was Six Trans gemacht hat im Kontext von lesbischen und Transgender-Frage im Iran, was ja eine sehr wichtige Frage ist, weil Frauen werden sowieso hart im Iran diskriminiert, wurden entrechtet. Dann LGBT-Community wurde sowieso entrechtet, completely. Und dann, wenn es zusammenkommt, Frauen und Transgender sind am meisten betroffen von dieser ganzen gender-based und sexual orientation-based discrimination. So, deshalb war das für mich halt wichtig, dass man auch, was eine andere Sache, was auch für mich wichtig war, dass Six Trans diese ganzen Fragen sehr politisch immer rangegangen ist und sehr politisch immer kontextualisiert hat und immer im Zusammenhang mit dem globalen Fragen und im Zusammenhang mit den partikularen Fragen im Iran und so weiter und so fort, aber immer politisch. Sixrank braucht nicht eine Woche, um gegen für Black Lives Matter und gegen Black Discrimination in den USA auf Farsi zu sprechen, sondern ein Tag, 2 Tage reicht es, um sofort zu wissen, okay, wir als eine iranische LGBT-Community haben auch diese Frage bei uns und wir müssen das rangehen und das ist eine globale Frage, eine internationalistische Frage. Wir dürfen nicht auf Farsi darüber schweigen. Und solche Sachen war das halt sehr für mich wichtig. Also die Narrative zu übernehmen, selber die eigene Narrative zu erzählen, das Leben von Lesbians, an iranischen Transgenders und auch andere Angehörige von der LGBT-Community, aber mit einem Fokus auf Lesbian und Transgender sichtbar zu machen und das Ganze politisch anzugehen. Und zwar im Kontext von mit Racism und Classism und genau, und die Frage von sozialer Gerechtigkeit und gegen Rassismus zu kämpfen, war immer für uns eine wichtige Frage. Deshalb habe ich mich auch bei Sixrank gefunden.
Dankeschön, Mina. I mean, it's always quite interesting to hear from you, and you actually have a lot to say when it comes to Iran, when it comes to women empowerment, when it comes to feminism, LGBT, and so on. We have a lot to discuss. We are fast approaching the end. In 8 minutes, we're done. But then, in case you're just joining, it's Nyimas Bantaba. Do follow us on our social media accounts at Nyimas Bantaba TV on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you name it. And Jennifer, at the International Women's Space, you co-authored or published about 5 publications, all completely on women issues. Are there any feminist approaches to these publications?
For sure, there were feminist approaches, even though the same thing I'm keeping on saying. Yeah. It was about the importance of women telling their stories and the reason why they flee. Because this question always keeps coming, why did you leave your country? So we wanted to react to this question from a very broad perspective, that different women from different parts of the world are fleeing, but the bottom line is they are fleeing from gender-based violence. And this is what we were able to project.
Very interesting. I think I have 2 or 3 publications, and I read only one, but I'll try to read all. Quite interesting, to learn from stories of other women. And Miriam, to you, my final last question. You are also part of Fem Lab. That is a laboratory for feminist research, education, and practice. What is your research focus with this laboratory?
Yeah, it's actually not just a research project, but it's something that comes from university. But the idea is it's a group of women from university, but also from the Frauen Academy, which is a non-university research institution. And we try to create spaces, digital spaces, analog spaces, where we can produce knowledge with very different people, like not only academic knowledge, but also non-academic knowledge, like to bring this together. And we had, at the beginning of this year, a big live stream, which was called Politics at the Kitchen Table. And there we tried really in a very easy manner to get access to the space and to talk from the kitchen table and bring very different discussions together. We had discussions about ecology and feminism, about intersectional feminism. We talked with a group of women with disabilities, and there was also a lot of discussion, and this is the aim of this group, to build more such or to create more such spaces. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Bárbara, like I said, we're talking about feminism in 4 different perspectives. Within our midst, we have an educationist, a lecturer, a doctor. She didn't want me to call her a doctor. We have an activist. You know, we have a journalist within us, Mina, and we have you, theater, art, and you. Aside feminism, you authored books, and one of your books is The Oppressed Theater. Tell us a bit about this, and what do you focus on? Maybe in a minute or so. We have 5 minutes to go.
It's okay. So I call myself an activist, a feminist, and anti-racist activist. For me, it's really important because when I write my books is I try to have this approach to the theory of the praxis. You know, the theory is not disconnected with the praxis. And I try to make books that become tools, people to use. You know, I have 3 books that is published in different language, and all of them I try to be accessible. I try to find a language that everybody can understand. It's not for academic people, but it's also for academic people, you know what I mean? It's like people in favela in Brazil, in Rio, they can take it as a tool also to empower their work and become a leadership and become a facilitator and leader of a process, a theater process, that's a social process. And then what I try in my books, make something useful. Yeah, the theory that born from the praxis, but also to feed the praxis of the others. This is my aim.
Not just the theory of the praxis, but to also feel the use of the others as well. That's a good concluding remark. Mina, on a final note, how is feminism taking you to? How far? I mean, let's say in the next 5 years' time, where are we expecting Mina to be? Have more feminists oder Iranian in the LGBTQ recruited?
Schwer, diese Frage zu beantworten. Ich weiß nicht, ich glaube, es ist so eine Frage eher, ich würde andere Leute fragen, wie sie unsere Arbeit sehen. Ich weiß nur, dass wir viel erreicht haben in den letzten Jahren in Fragen, wenn es um den Iran kommt, dass es halt die Frage, die Frauenfrage, die LGBT-Frage mittlerweile eine sehr, sehr ernst genommene Frage ist innerhalb im politischen Kontext oder im sozialen Kontext, und man kann nicht drum herum sprechen, man muss darüber sprechen, und wir haben da, ich mit anderen Feministen, iranischen Feministen, haben da eine wichtige Rolle gespielt, glaube ich, und weltweit denke ich, dass es halt nach der Pandemie, wir haben viel zu tun auch in Deutschland, also es waren jetzt, die letzten 2 Jahre waren nicht so viel los aus meiner Sicht, wenn ich jetzt betrachte und vergleiche Feminismus im Iran und hier. Es ist nicht so viel passiert aus meiner Sicht in Deutschland in den letzten 2 Jahren, aber wir haben viel zu tun. Und ich meine, wir müssen auch aus der Vergangenheit so ein bisschen lernen und nach vorne zu schauen.
Danke dir, nach vorne zu schauen. Look forward, and I also look forward to your work. And on a final 1-minute note from you. I know IVS is like into a lot of women empowerment, feminism, and so on. Just zusammenfassen, what focus has in link to feminism, IVS? You guys do a lot of things.
We do a lot of stuff. It's not easy to summarize it in one statement. I think it's the most important is about women empowerment.
Yes.
And taking up spaces as women of color, as migrant women, as refugee women. Because when we do not take up the spaces, we accept to be invisibilized. And this is what we take as a responsibility.
Miriam Gutekunst, 2 words, maybe, finally, and then we close.
Yeah, I think German feminists should listen and learn.
Feminists should listen and learn. Feminists should work. More inclusion, more women empowerment from Jenny. A great concluding remark. Well, we've been talking about an hour long about feminism and how feminism does to society from different perspectives, from 4 powerful women for different countries? Well, personally, I have learned a lot from this discussion. Example, the feminist movement that affects change in Western society, including women's suffrage, greater access to education, more equitable pay with men, like a mosque fight core in Germany, the right to initiate divorce proceedings, the right of women to make individual decisions. Nevertheless, it is possible to identify 3 main ways in which feminists have capitalized power as a result of redistributed as domination and as empowerment. Until then, do have a very good end of October. My name is Nyima Jadama. That was the Bantaba. Join us next month for another edition of Nyimas Bantaba on the banner there.